everyone. Welcome to Great Talks podcast. I'm Danny, and I will talk to Trey Starnes today, the executive director of God's Littlest Angels in Haiti. If you haven't heard about it yet, they work to provide exceptional neonatal care and safe haven to the smallest, sickest, and most vulnerable children of Haiti. But before we begin talking about this, just to remind you that it's here, but haven't done that yet, subscribe. Remember to like our podcast, both in YouTube, if you're watching there, or in your podcast app. All right. Now, hi, Trey. Welcome to Great Talks.
Hey, Danny. It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. I'm always say this every time I do an episode talking about actions on Haiti. I'm from Brazil, and I love listening to people helping out the situation there. So I feel very good about it. So I think in this podcast we've covered some people working, helping the environment and doing reforestation work in Haiti. Yep. We've done people working with malnutrition, but that's the first one that we talk to someone that is deeply involved with the child situation, not on just neonatal care, but also doing fostering care as well. But beginning with some context, what is the situation on child mortality in Haiti right now?
Yeah, child mortality is the highest in the Western Hemisphere in Haiti, and premature birth as well. Much of that is due to malnutrition, which, I mean, like you mentioned, you've already spoken to some people about that. So we'll see a lot of children under the age of 5 who will pass away as a result of some of the issues that come from being premature at birth. A lot of mothers also pass away in that process. So it's a really big problem that we see. I think last estimates we saw were approximately 2,700 kids under the age of 5 will pass away each year just as a result of some of those lasting effects of premature birth. And then you couple that with the malnutrition. It's really quite a big problem.
I can imagine that. I think in Brazil we had some similar situation many years ago, but still, and it's also a problem of structure as well, right? Because sure. I keep imagining that, of course, there's no comparison to what you have in the United States, but the NICU structure is quite intense, right? You need to have access to lots of meds and a structure to keep the child warm. So in this whole scenario, what have you been doing to help out these kids?
So as far as our NICU is concerned, it's been in operation since '94 in varying sizes and capacities. We have several incubators. We've got some doctors we contract with. We also have nurses on staff. At last count, there was only 5 NICUs in the country. And we know that COVID has actually caused a couple of those to stop operating as well. So, a lot of what we see and we deal with sort of fall under 3 big categories. One is lack of education, things that could be very easily taken care of if there was more understanding and knowledge in general. For instance, on how to keep babies warm, the proper way to feed babies, things like that, things that are very preventative. See a lot of that. I would say 75% of our cases would fall under that. The other 2 big things are going to be malnutrition due to lack of food availability, especially for infants. Now in the States, there's a large formula crisis. And so just imagine trying to face that same challenge in a country like Haiti where the infrastructure is not very good. And then respiratory, we see a lot of respiratory things and a lot of that's interlinked. So that's sort of the 3 big umbrella things that we are constantly trying to address.
Wow, that's actually quite impressive, and I keep thinking about this. I did a few days ago an interview, as I said, with an organization tackling malnutrition, and it's such a persistent problem, right? It's not, and doesn't have like a simple solution, if you think about it. And what are you doing in more detail on education for these kids? Yep. I was very curious about that.
So we actually have 2 sort of wings of our education program. One of them is for our creche program, which is our orphanage where we have residential children who are living on site with us in our children's village. So they actually have a school on site. We employ teachers and we implement curriculum. So they go to school every day. They learn Creole, they learn English, and we actually work to try and as a child is paired through Haitian Social Services with an adoptive family, if they're up for that, we actually work to try and educate them on the language of the country that they're going to. To date, we've done over 1,000 adoptions in 14 different countries. So that's a pretty big thing that we do. And then we also have an education sponsorship that is for outside of GLA. And those we have some different students who donors specifically pay for them to go to school, to buy their supplies and that kind of thing every year. Education, there's no free public education in Haiti. It's all private. And it can be quite the burden on a family when most Haitians don't really make a lot. I think right now for those in the States, the current exchange is somewhere between 110 to 120 of their Haitian goods to $1 US. And so it's quite a big jump. And so we sponsor every year and we hand out those funds to those families who then take that to pay for their students to go to school. Of course, there's an application process and report card follow-ups and all of that. But yeah, so those are sort of the two sides of education that we're doing right now.
That's quite impressive. And since you touched the point of adoption, this is another interesting thing that I kept thinking. How is the process? How do you actually get the kid prepared, and how do you get in touch with families? Because most of the adoptions happens abroad, right? If I got it right.
That's correct. Yeah. Our ideal would be to keep the child with their family. Obviously, that's definitely the primary focus if we can do that. As far as international adoption goes, any child placed with us is approved through IBSR, which is Haitian Social Services, and they operate under Hague requirements for international adoption. So there's a process in which a family would apply for adoption to their local agency, whatever agency that may be in the country that you are in. You indicate that Haiti is the country that you would like to adopt from. And usually you pick a gender and an age range. And at that point, you begin to undergo all the different steps of the process. For sake of time, we won't go through all of that, but that includes home checks, background checks, et cetera. At that point, you are then matched with a child. And so we are notified through the government that X child has been matched with this family. That process then begins. There's a socialization visit, which the family comes down. They spend approximately 2 weeks, I believe, is the current standard time, living at our facility. We have 2 dedicated houses just for that. We call them our parent pods. And so the child will then live with the parent, their potential adoptive parents for that time frame. They'll go to school, whatever, but they will come back and they will live with them. It's just an adjustment period to make sure everything's going to work. From that point, it's about a year to finalize the adoption. You've got all your documents and your paperwork and those types of things. So all of that is handled through intermediaries with the organization and the government. And we're simply the family services on the end of that.
I got it. And thank you for clarifying that. I feel like every time that we speak about adoption overseas, it might get into this gray area of what is going on. So I feel it's important to understand that you have like this reliability system and that you were working close with the child to secure their well-being, right? Yeah, absolutely. That's impressive. And just making a quick diversion here and letting everyone know about your website, that is GLA, G-L-A, Haiti, HAITI.org. You can check that website out. You're going to have this written down also on our article and on the podcast description here. And in there, you can find all information possible about the work they're doing. And I think most importantly is ways to help. And moving to that especially, I thought it was very interesting here that you have many, many ways to help out. But I got to say that the gift catalog was something that caught my eye. I thought that was a very interesting idea. Let's chat about that a little bit, how that happened. What is it?
Yeah, so the gift catalog is just a way for an individual to come to us, and every person who gets involved has sort of a special niche thing they like to contribute to, and so we said, okay, well, let's allow people to sort of pick and choose how they would like to help support God's Littlest Angels. So that's kind of where the gift catalog idea came from. It's also a really great opportunity to educate people on Haiti and what it takes to operate an organization in the country. Those of us who live in more of the first world context, the idea of having to afford, say, 24-hour security, well, that's not a normal thing, but it's an everyday cost and requirement in Haiti. The concept that there is no power grid where our facility is located, that's also sort of foreign. So it's sort of a double-edged sword. It gives us the opportunity to fund some of those necessities, but also it lets us, in a way, educate people as well.
Yeah, and I feel like this is absolutely important because, as you said, it's a different reality, right? It's distant, and it's really hard to picture it without
Sure.
really understanding. And what other challenges do you face in there trying to keep these operations going?
Yeah, I would say logistics are probably the biggest challenge, especially right now with the current climate in Haiti. It's very unstable. Unfortunately, most of everything is imported, and so it has to come through the capital, which is where you see a lot of unrest. And so there's those challenges. So security is always a challenge. It's just a matter of how challenging at a time it would be. Our other biggest challenge is power generation. There is a power grid where we are, but every time I've been on the ground, and I've been quite a bit, it's non-existent. It's either not on, or when it turns on, it's barely enough power to the whole complex to charge a cell phone. So obviously, when you're talking about caring for 50 plus kids and you've got incubators running and oxygen concentrators, you can't rely on that grid. And so we have to generate our own power through means of diesel generators. We recently installed a really rather large solar setup. So at current, we can actually operate about 90% of the time on solar alone. So the sort of getting into some of that renewable energy. We have large garden spaces that our kids get to work in sort of as the garden club, but we also utilize them in addition for growing of produce. And so there's some solutions, but yeah, security. And then the biggest change for us and challenge wise, when COVID hit, we actually had to lock down our facility for about 6 months, nobody in and nobody out. All employees became residents. So that was a challenge. And we had been adapted to operate with volunteers. It was nothing for us to see 20 plus teams come down and just work with us on our facilities, hang out with our kids, just be there and really provide support. That's in addition to long-term missionaries and short-term missionaries who would be there 3, 6, 9 months, or even some self-supported staff. And so all of that has stopped since COVID. So that's been a big challenge as well, that we've been able to utilize some technology, but also bring in some more native Haitian staff and that kind of thing. So those are sort of some of the big challenges. That's a long list we could talk about for a long time.
Well, yeah, I can imagine that. But even with all of those adversities, do you have an idea of how many children you were able to help so far?
Oh, I off the top of my head, I don't. Like I said, we've facilitated over 1,000 adoptions, and that doesn't count any of our NICU numbers or our medical assistance, because we will bring some children in who simply need malnutrition help or respiratory that don't really categorize inside of NICU. But I couldn't tell you just offhand how many NICU graduates we've had and that kind of thing.
No, but that's okay. That's already good to know that you have these things running in a point that you just cannot keep track, let's say. On your head, you cannot count on your fingers how
Yeah, yeah,
many
yeah.
lives you've saved. Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of moving to the end of this interview, unfortunately, let's talk about how people can get involved,
Sure.
because of course donating is a big part of it, and I very much if you could share how can people help you out. But there are other ways, right? Where can people can get involved?
Sure. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, I think every nonprofit will highlight donating as a part of being involved. And you mentioned the gift catalog, and then we even have some recurring options where you can choose child sponsorship that lets you pick one of our kids in our facility currently, and you'll actually learn a little bit of background information about them. You'll get monthly updates. Occasionally, they'll send you crafts and that kind of thing, and you can actually reciprocate. So there's that model. You can also choose to recurring sponsor medical or education. So I think, like you said, there's plenty of information about that on our website, and that's always a good way to get involved. We also do have quite a few volunteer opportunities for people who say, hey, I really want to use my time and skill set. Even though right now we're not offering travel in country due to security, we've got a lot of things as far as peer-to-peer fundraising opportunities, or if you have a special skill set that, we've got a lot of availability to use those type of things, whether that be informational booths or what we call living room events, where it's just informational conversations with me or anybody else in our staff or board of directors. There's a lot of ways to get involved and support. Just as an example, we had a young lady who just collected tennis shoes for all of our kids and all of our staff. So she personally went out and got people to donate. I think she collected over 100 pairs of tennis shoes just to send down, so all of our kids could have new shoes and all of our employees and that kind of thing. So there's tons of creative ways to get involved. And we love people who think outside the box.
Well, that's awesome. I gotta say that when I was checking your website before this interview, I totally saw a spot of an availability for volunteering here for myself. So
Yep.
You might receive my own application.
That'd be awesome.
In a few days. Yeah, so this is incredible because we can actually help out without giving more than we can actually compromise, and without leaving our homes, because we have actually remote positions here that could be filled. So
Absolutely.
Please, people, do go there and check it out and donate. I think that's also something that I like to stress out here, because money, unfortunately, money is money, right? It pays for things. Yeah, it gets things done, and people still need that. But now my final question for you today is, let's daydream here a little bit. And for the future, in 5 years, 10 years, what do you see? Where do you see this organization being in? How do you see this future?
Sure. So programmatically, our focus in moving forward is in our medical space. We feel our creche side and our education is operating pretty well with minimal analysis and tweaks, right? We are in process actually right now of relocating and expanding our NICU facility, as well as securing our own means of transportation to go and actually get families that need those services. So that's sort of the immediate goal, followed up with a step down unit. So when a baby transitions out of a NICU, they go into a step down for continued monitoring, but a lower level of needed medical attention, if you will. Follow up from that, we would really like to branch further into medical and begin to offer prenatal and maternal care, as well as the big vision and dream is a labor and delivery space. So we can offer sort of that care from pregnancy through to post delivery. That's sort of the big vision for the next 5 years that we'd like to see reached.
Wow, that would be incredible to see. And I do hope you get there. And as far as we can help, we're here. And I hope that everyone listening also engage to make this future something true. Thank you so much for talking to us. I love this talk, Trey. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, Danny. It was great to just chat for a few minutes.